the construction of complex tools and evidence for the existence of complex social organizations, symbolic representation, even pretty fantastic symbolic art, measurement of celestial events, maybe by phases of the moon and so on. All of this happens in a very short time from an evolutionary point of view. It may be roughly, say, 75,000 years ago, plus or minus. Now what that tells you is that whatever this capacity is that distinguishes humans from other organisms must have developed very quickly and therefore must have been very simple. In fact, what it suggests is that what's in the mind is basically something like kind of like a snowflake. It takes a complex form, but just by virtue of the laws of nature, and not because of some evolutionary process. That's just the way it has to be because of the way nature works. Now, a language is a computational system, a very unusual feature of human language, very unusual within the whole biological world, is it has a property called discrete infinity. So there's a 6-word sentence, there's a 7-word sentence, but there's no 6.5-word sentence, and it goes on indefinitely. That's different from almost anything in the biological world. Now, such systems are understood by mid-20th century, thanks to the work of Turing, Gödel, others. The general theory of computation involving such systems was quite well understood, and that suggests to us that that's exactly what emerged sometime, say roughly 75,000 years ago, and all of the diversity and complexity of language must somehow either derive directly from that or be peripheral to language, like the way in which it's articulated by the mouth. The sensory motor system has been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and our effort to take this internal snowflake and get it out of your mouth is a complicated process, and it's pretty well understood by now that that's where that external process, really peripheral to language, is where the complexity and diversity of language resides. Also its mutability, that changes quite easily. But when you learn a language, that's what you learn. You don't learn the internal principles that determine the meaning and structure of expressions. One of the reasons you don't learn that is there's no data for it. The child is not presented with any evidence for that. What you are presented with evidence for is things like pronunciation, word order, the morphological paradigms. Do you express plural or don't you express it? Things like that. That's what you have to learn, but it's all external to language. The internal part, what probably evolved, say, in that brief window, must be something extremely simple and invariant. Same for all languages.
Now, you pointed out to me when we were talking about this again last stage that we should put a caveat here that the views you express are your views, and in fact, you would argue that they're a minority among modern linguists.
Tiny minority, and I'm not trying to persuade you.
Yeah, no. But
you're supposed to investigate to see whether this makes any sense.
One question I want to ask is why is that? Because again, as most of the physical scientists in the audience, I mean, that just, as a physicist, and we call it reductionism, or some people don't like that, but we've been very successful. The world around us is very, very complicated, but it seems natural to explain it in terms of very simple principles, and we've been very, very successful over 400 years at doing just that. It seems to me kind of obvious, if you were going to approach this, that that's what you'd look for. Why the resistance in linguistics?
That was 400 years. This is 40 years.
Okay.
If you look back at